Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on the topic Digital First Intake, the Future of Pharmacovigilance. My name is Kalina. I'm part of the marketing team at Qinecsa, and I'll be your co-host for today's session along with my colleague Dan, who I'll introduce very shortly. So a quick note on the organizer of today's webinar. Qinecsa is a technology-driven pharmacovigilance provider offering end-to-end PV services and solutions backed by 15 years of experience. So what can you expect from today's webinar? Our speaker, Daniel O'Keefe, who I will introduce very shortly, will take you through the digital transformation of case intake and will share his insights on what industry leaders can do to stay ahead of the curve. The webinar will last for approximately 25 minutes, followed by a 5-minute Q&A at the end to address any specific questions. So please feel free to submit any questions you have in the Q&A section that is available on your screen in the box, and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. Okay, so I'm very happy to introduce you now to our expert speaker for today, Daniel O'Keefe. Dan is Qinecsa's Vice President of Product for the Reportum platform, and he brings over 15 years of expertise delivering successful digital solutions in healthcare. Dan is a big part of how Qinecsa's technology grew into the industry leader it is today and used by several of the world's largest pharma companies. So without further ado, I will hand it over now to Dan. Take it away, Dan.
Thank you, Kalina, for that very warm introduction. I really appreciate that. As Kalina mentioned, I'm VP of Product for Reportum, and it is a pleasure and a delight actually to present this topic to you today. It's actually something I'm quite passionate about, to be honest about it, being the lead for Reportum. Before I get started, I do want to just briefly step you through our agenda, just to give you an idea of what to expect for today. So I will start off talking about digital trends in general for data collection and what we've seen across other industries. I'll then move on to talking about what are the complexities we have in PV for kind of adopting similar approaches, and I think there are quite a lot of complexities there. I'll then pivot to talking a bit about, well, what are the kinds of users that can use digital first, particularly when people have a real intention to report or they need to. I'll talk about having a more connected ecosystem to get data flowing to the right places through APIs. And I'll then move to talk about the business benefits and what I think is an inevitable shift that may be fast or may be slow, but is certainly inevitable. I'll then introduce Reportum, which is our unified intake product, discuss its scalability, and right at the end, I'll just sum up and give you a summary of everything. So before we get started, I would like to give you a kind of a definition of what I'm going to be talking about. What do I see as digital first in PV? And for me, it's about the first recorded version of the case is in a format that can flow into the safety database. That doesn't mean someone's necessarily intentionally recording it, but it stays in a digital format and flows right the way through. So kind of this is sort of my definition of what I'll be using to talk through the presentation. So I just wanted to start talking a little bit about how digital, like capturing data digitally at the very start, has transformed other industries. And I've chosen 3 specific examples that I have specific little stories to tell on each one. So the first one I've chosen there is clinical data, and I've chosen EDC and patient-reported outcomes. I actually started my career in patient-reported outcomes 20 years ago. And back then, a lot of the data collection was done on paper, and we would, it was quite pioneering what we were doing. Since then, obviously, we can see now that sort of, and I got this graphic from a well-respected journal, we can see that sort of 80% of clinical data, EDC, patient-reported outcomes, and so on, is now usually captured electronically at the beginning. And a lot of the big providers of these systems will talk about speed to market of products, and that's sort of one of their big marketing strategies, because that's really what they're doing. They're getting great data and they're trying to speed up that speed to market. And actually there was a lot of press around COVID time where they had to speed data through for getting vaccines approved. The second example I've got is photography. And with this, I think about when this transformation happened, going from sort of analog cameras to sort of digital, I don't think people would have predicted the benefits of it. And I'll tell you one particular story. So, I'll take my kids out for a day out and we'll take lots of photos on my phone. And then a few days later, I'll get this beautiful video pop up on my phone where it will say, have a look at your day out. And it will piece together the photos in a beautiful way and put some music in. So having that digital data available allows AI to immediately go in there and do some really nice things with the data. Obviously, a famous story here is obviously the Kodak, who didn't really jump on with this transformation as they maybe should have. The other one I wanted to choose was insurance claims. So again, I remember like a long time ago, maybe, I don't know, over 20 years ago, doing an insurance claim. And I think it was a phone that was broken and I had it insured, and I called the insurance company and they sent me this big black brown envelope with the form to fill in. And I was like, oh, this is such a hassle. And now I think a few weeks ago, I went to visit the dentist and I had to claim it. So when I got home, I just opened my phone, I photoed the receipt, I filled in this simple online form, and the insurance company got the great data through and they were able to process it very quickly. So again, just 3 examples of with digital transformation, the typical model is that it transforms the intake of the data. If we move to the next slide, the big question for me is this transformation has been slower in PV than other industries. And I've puzzled for, the last 5 or 6 years why this is. And I think there are very good reasons for it. And the next slide is my attempt to sort of explain that. I don't think this slide does full justice to the complexity that in PV, but it's my attempt at it. I think cases can come in from so many different places and it's extremely complicated, right? You can have people reporting very directly, your consumers who, decide they want to report. People are more aware now that they can search for a pharma company and they might want to submit a report. You have your vendors who are going to be maybe running PSP programs, market research programs, specialty pharmacies. You have your clinical trials. You have all of this complexity to deal with, and all of these cases flowing in. And in the big pharma, this is on a global scale, this is in multiple languages, this is a complex scenario. Then you have your indirect sources. So you've got cases that are going to come from literature, from partners, from regulators, from CRM systems that are often that face to the world of when someone comes through to a call center. So cases are going to flow in there. And the way the industry's dealt with this, I think, is elegant. We've got dedicated hubs. Generally, when I talk to our customers, this is how it's often resolved, that will then process those cases, make sure the local regulations are met, redaction is done, data is cleansed, and it gets through to the central PV system. We know the industry's focused a lot on AI extraction in order to get cases through this model into the safety database. And Qinecsa does that too, right? Part of the product is doing this type of extraction. However, I believe that this model does miss an important opportunity, and that's the opportunity I would like to talk about on the next slide. And I think part of this, if we think back to the last slide, the top half was generally people that have an intention to report. So they might be a consumer, they might be a study person that's soliciting the AEs and they know they need to report. And it starts with a person in that type of scenario that wants to report, and we need to understand those personas. So then the next part is, well, thinking about who are those personas. And I've just given a few examples here. And again, this for me is all about someone has the intention to report. So they've got in their head, okay, I'm a consumer. There's a report I want to submit. I've had a mild adverse event and I'm aware that I can. So I'm going to search for the pharma company and see if there's a way to do it. And in this scenario, they should have as a good digital experience, and it's better for the brand if they do, right? and they need a simple form to fill. It needs to work on their mobile phone. It needs to work in their local language. All these things should really happen. You've then got things like employees or sales reps. And we know, again, this use case is, for example, really big in Japan, where the sales rep will go in and they're going to need to report. Again, they should probably have, as a paid, they're a paid professional. They know they need to report as part of their job description. They should probably have a decent digital tool that allows them to do that in their local language. And they might be on their iPhone, they might be on their tablet, and so on and so forth. And then the final one I have there is like vendors. So if it's a PSP vendor, a specialty pharmacy, someone running a market research program, I think they want to do a good job. So again, they need to report. There's specific data that they will need to collect. So they will need to tell about the program they're running. They will need to give that data. So the digital experience should be context specific for them. Also, ideally, I think these people wouldn't want to receive lots of follow-up reminders. So ideally, they would want to be guided of what data should I capture up front when I'm filling in this report. And this is one of the ways we think about it with Reportum, is we think about these different personas. When you do this, you can get that great data, just like we discussed with the photography example. You can then apply much richer workflow, so your translation's much easier because you've got that much better data to translate against. You can automatically redact because you know which fields are there. And we can apply AI to all of this. So AI should not just be applied to extract data, it should be applied to allow people to enter and get better data and analyze the data. Follow-up is a really important thing to talk about, because you have a digital connection with the person that's reported, the originator of the report. You can route the follow-up directly back to that person and they can append to that case. So you're not going to get as much of the duplicates that you get typically in PV when you don't do this type of method. So you might then say, okay, well, there are also indirect cases. So how do we handle that in this model? So I'd just like to talk about a few examples on that side. So I really think we need a joined up ecosystem. So to give an example, we know, for example, that CRM systems often face the world in big companies, including pharma. So if someone comes through to a call center about a different query and it turns out it's an adverse event or something that needs to be reported to the safety team, we should have APIs that can route to the right tools and today's great digital workflows that we discussed, and we should preserve that digital data through. I also often, when I'm thinking about the future of where this is all going, I often think about, connected devices. Now people have like smartwatches and other health devices. And then there's also the rise of agents, AI agents, and they might be looking for an API in which to report. So we need to make this available through an API ecosystem, something that, I think is important. So we need to be able to, get data from people when they have an intention to report, but we also need to get those indirect cases through a joined up connected ecosystem. I think, and this is my view, that this digital first shift to collecting better data up front is inevitable in PV. I think it is slower than in other industries, but I don't think that means it's not going to happen. And it is happening, and we see it happening with a lot of large pharma. If we go to the next slide, I've put some key points around this. So number one, improve engagement. So we discussed earlier, someone goes to report a consumer, they go to the to the pharma website. They need a good experience, otherwise that hurts the brand reputation, right? That's really important. If someone's a paid professional, they should be provided with the right tools to help them. And not only that, but it improves data quality. We know in PV follow-up rates are around 10%. They're really low. So you're unlikely to get that great data later if you don't get it at that moment when you have the best opportunity to get it. So it definitely improves data quality. You get streamlined workflows. So like we discussed, you know, you're going to get better translation because you've got better data to translate against. It's going to be faster. You're going to get better follow-up because you can go back to the case originator and ask for the follow-up. So you don't have all these duplicates coming in that are follow-ups that you need to kind of append to existing cases. We also are definitely going to reduce CAPAs because we are getting everything through a validated system, right? And not only all of these great benefits, but you're going to lower operational costs because you're going to not have messy data coming in as much. And one of the points I'd like to make here is I've never seen a customer that's moved to digital first for their use cases and then gone, actually, you know what, this isn't working, it's always the case that when this transformation happens, it sticks. And that's because it is better. And this is why I think it's inevitable that it will either be a slow or it will speed up, but it's definitely an inevitable change in the industry. So I'd like to introduce Reportum. Reportum is our digital first reporting platform. Reportum is a unified digital first SaaS technology to standardize and streamline the initial capture and follow-up of adverse events, medical information, and product quality data. On the right there, you can see I've kind of created this an image of different intake sources. So in the very middle is digital first, what we call digital first intake. And this is your user personas that we were talking about earlier that need the right digital tools. One of the cornerstones of Reportum is the ability to configure for these different personas and make sure they get the right context-specific data for what they need to do. On the right, you can see in yellow, we also do document ingestion. So we know, you know, not everything can transform to this, but we do offer document ingestion as well. And we use industry-leading technology to ingest documents into the Reportum workflow. On the left, something we're currently working on as we speak is the ability to capture data through that API and having that joined up ecosystem. And, you know, we've worked with one of our customers to integrate with RMS, and we've got a request for EDC. So all of this joining up is something we're working on at the moment as well to improve in the product. Reportum is a mature product over 10 years in production. So Reportum has a global footprint. We collect reports all over the world, and again, directly from report originators. And this is the key thing we're trying to push. And with that, it's so important to support different languages. So if our mission is to collect data from report originators, at the moment when they have the intention to report and they're ready to give you that data, you need to talk to them in their local language. So currently, we're just about to expand to support 21 major languages, and these are the languages. It is used globally. We see reports flowing in from over 110 different countries. And in the future, we're currently working on expanding beyond major languages to support other languages in large markets. For example, we were thinking about India and other markets where it's going to be important that we expand out to support more languages. So how do we achieve all this? So we've talked a lot about different user personas that want to report, and they need different context-specific tools. So within Reportum, we have something we call the PV Design Studio, and this is our tool that allows us to build these context-specific tools in a beautiful, mobile, responsive, multi-language web application. We bring deep domain expertise when we design these tools with our clients. But we don't have to design it from scratch. We can pick from templates, and the client can choose how much customization they would like to have. It's no code. It's all configurable. We also can have portfolio and business specific considerations when we configure this. So we will make sure we collect the great data not just for the user persona as we discussed, but also for your business considerations. You know, is there portfolio considerations? Do you have a blockbuster product where you really need to get some data on that to avoid follow-up? So all of that will be considered, and we will design those digital experiences. So Reportum isn't just an intake platform, it also has a powerful workflow engine powering underneath it. So obviously there's the report capture that can come in as authenticated users. via single sign-on or a local login. And again, those paid professionals are usually going to be authenticating because you know who they are and you want them to log in properly and have all of that audit trailed. We obviously, then there's the members of the public that don't need authentication layers, so we also offer that. And then we talked about those upstream integrations, and this is something we're developing out further at the moment, where we'll be able to support different formats coming into the system. We also, as discussed, can intake, unstructured emails, forms such as COMs, MedWatch, as well as customer specific forms if we configure for those. Once the data is submitted, it will flow into a powerful workflow engine. And as said, it's more powerful because we have great data to work with. We can do automated redaction. We can flow it to a QC step, which is required in some specific scenarios, and we can translate it. And it will go through the workflow engine differently depending on the persona, because the data needs to be handled differently depending on where it's come from. It will then go into our export engine where we can generate an ETB-R3 and ETB-R2, and we're just at the moment in our next release going to be developing the ability to output any JSON that's required. And then it will flow into the safety database or the downstream database where it needs to go, and we will receive an acknowledgement file back, and we will auto-reconcile everything in real time. And theoretically, a case can flow directly from the report directly to the safety database with very minimum human interaction. Because as discussed earlier, because who those reporters are through a digital system, you can also send the follow-up request directly back to them. And that's in the purple arrow underneath. That is a piece we are developing in the current release, and we're hoping will be that ability to query released by the end of this year. So this is highly scalable. So the next question would become, well, how can you support all these different personas so you can design the digital intake experiences, and then how do you add them, and how do you ensure it's scalable? So we can add new personas in the system and assign settings with them. So we can assign the workflow they go through, or the UI experience they see, and all these things. And typically, for example, new programs can be added. So our customers, we'll look at a customer instance and we'll have added 10 new PSP programs last week, and all this is available for the customer to add whenever they need. And it really helps solve that complexity, because then through these personas, you can develop this global PV landscape within the tool and flow the data through different workflows for different personas, each with their own settings. For example, if they require redaction because of the local regulations and other things like that. And this is just to really give you that that view of the scalability of the product. So finally, I'd just like to end with a small case study and talk a little about the ROI of doing this. So we've just kind of compared intake with a digital tool like Reportum compared to, say, a more traditional PV flow. And you can see that things like case receipt, booking, data entry, all kind of go to zero when you do this, because you're getting that great data up front, right? And then obviously you have the option to flow it through workflows as we discussed, and then you also get a benefit of being auto-reconciling with your safety database all in real time. And sometimes the adoption of a tool like Reportum becomes a necessity. So I've put a small case study here, which is, a top 10 pharma contacted us because they had a blockbuster product, and they were literally overwhelmed, and their traditional workflows of trying to process the cases through data entry, booking, acceptance was so overwhelmed. They were just like, we need a tool that's gonna kind of streamline all of this. So they approached us and they adopted Reportum, and they adopted multiple use cases: public, employees, specialty pharmacies, PSPs, and so on. And on average achieved around a 65% reduction in processing. Obviously, for simpler cases, this is a higher reduction, and for more complex cases, it's lower. But this is a kind of average estimation based on that. Reportum is a highly scalable platform. The nice thing is the platform scalability aligns with the mission of the product. So it needs to be an incredibly performant application so that anyone, anywhere, anytime can report. So it's highly scalable. It's cloud native. It's hosted in AWS. In fact, we were one of the earlier companies to adopt AWS for a regulated industry. It's secure and robust. We're always doing penetration testing, and it's highly controlled and monitored. So in summary, just like to quickly summarize, we're really advocating for digital first data capture, just like other industries have. There is complexity, but if we understand those personas and those people with the intention to report, then we can provide them with great digital tools. We really believe there should be a great joined up ecosystem that's API driven to get in those other cases that aren't necessarily coming from someone that directly intends to report when they go to use a digital tool. And AI as an enabler. So AI is obviously powerful for document ingestion, and we're using it there, but I believe it can be critical also at intake to help capture great data. And the final sentiment to end on it would be, for me, let's not just automate this function, let's design for quality, engagement, and trust from the start. Reportum Qinecsa does work with 12 of the top 20 pharma companies, partner with us, and many of whom use Reportum for digital first data capture.
Okay, thanks so much, Dan, for that very interesting presentation. We've now reached the Q&A part of the webinar, so we're going to have a look at all the questions we've received, and Dan will hopefully try and get through them all in today's session. So let's just have a look what we have. Okay, so Dan, your first question is, how have you seen the uptake of digital first in your company?
So we obviously work with a number of top 10, top 20 farmers, as well as some smaller clients, and we see very good response to digital first. I think one of the challenges is often there is pushback, and people will say, well, people don't want to use digital tools, they want to just fill an email. And actually, when it actually, in reality, when people use it, they've been surveyed and they're like, this is great, like it allows me to do my job really well. Reportum's used by, I think, over 100 vendors that work on behalf of big pharma, collecting data, running studies, running market research programs. And we've never really seen negative response to it. But I think it's obviously a big business change, and that's usually the main challenge that we will work with our clients on. But when it's adopted, it's always very welcome.
Okay, thanks so much, Dan. Our next question is, how long does it take to adopt Reportum?
It can vary, and it's often the client's ability to do the business change and do a UAT of the product to make sure it meets their business needs. The quickest we've seen it is probably around 2 months. But depending on the client, it could take 3 or 4 months, or maybe a little longer. And it depends also how much customization they want to do to the intake, the intake experiences to customize for those different user personas. So how many user personas they want to deal with in the first adoption, and things like that would affect it. But the quickest is 2 months, and it can be a little longer, maybe 4 months or 6 months if they want to do more with the system.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Last question before we run out of time. How do you see AI helping digital first?
So I think AI will become a really important enabler for making sure that great data is captured up front. Maybe providing feedback, so you're a member of the public reporting an adverse event, and maybe providing some med-info feedback to them. Maybe ensuring that great follow-up data is captured, and we can do things like that. So I think there's a great opportunity to use AI to enhance data capture up front.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Dan. So we are running out of time, so we won't be able to answer any more questions in today's session. However, if we have any unanswered questions, we will be responding to via email, and we'll be sending those to you as well with the webinar recording. So keep a lookout for that in your inbox. So that concludes today's session. Thank you to everyone who joined us. A big thank you to Dan for that very interesting presentation. We hope you enjoyed today's session. If you did, stay tuned as we have a lot more interesting webinars planned ahead. And we will be sending out a super quick survey by email just to get your feedback on today's session. It should only take about 2 minutes of your time, so we can hopefully make this webinar more interesting and informative for you. So we'd appreciate if you could take some time for that. Otherwise, yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and we hope to see you in our next webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.